Hey guys, welcome to the Powerful Man Show, where we help married businessmen save their marriages without having to talk about it, get unstuck, and gain clarity in their lives. As I like to say, life is too short for average. I'm your host, Doug Holt, with my co host, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. Now let's get this started. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Powerful Man Show. I'm your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. What's going on, brother?
Yeah, doing well. I've enjoyed these podcasts. You've brought a couple of really good topics to the table. Nice job, brother.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you saying I normally don't? Is that an unusual thing? Is what you're alluding to?
I'll leave you to decide upon that.
Nice to see the dog in the background.
Yeah, I'm dog sitting. Amelia's in Leeds,
Yeah.
so that means I'm dog sitting a bit of a wild card. But anyway, what are you thinking?
So when you're dog sitting in your own house,
Yep.
what does that mean for you? Do you have to be around the dogs the whole time? Do you have to watch the dogs?
No, so Amelia's
hand
taken
feed
one of
them?
the dogs to Leeds, Paddy.
Yep.
Obviously, you know what's been going on with him, so he's gone to the vet. Now, this dog here, Wilma, she's the one that's incredibly nervous and anxious and all sorts. So,
Bites people.
obviously, we got her from a rescue centre, as you know. Paddy
I
and
do.
Amelia are her saviours. She's drawn the short straw and been left with me, which means, we've not yet been able to train her to be left on her own. She just freaks out. Usually Paddy's here. Doesn't matter. We leave with him. So what dog sitting means, given that Amelia and Paddy are not here, really is that I have to stay in the house. Not a major deal. Watch her. Obviously, I won't be watching her. She'll be following me around like a shadow. And she just gets incredibly anxious at times. And she can misbehave and do other things. That can result in various things happening in the house. So it's not a major deal, but it'd be much easier if I could just leave her. Anyway,
I'd imagine so.
is what it is.
Yeah.
Amelia's pride and joy. So, yeah, there's something I wanted to bring to the table that happened. It's been unfolding this week, really, for me, which has been fun. And I didn't realize prior to this thing unfolding, I didn't realize how much I was lacking this certain thing in my life. So, about 10 days ago, obviously, you're familiar with all the routines that we've got. Alpha Rise and Shine, Alpha Decompression, the weekly review, all those fantastic tools.
Oh,
So about a week ago, I was using the Chart of Intentional Living for Businessmen, the COIL that we give all the men in the movement. It's a self-reflection tool. And I was playing with this idea of living in the gain versus the gap. You know, you and I have been speaking about that a little bit as well. And in doing so, it really dawned on me that I'd been really craving a lot more adventure and excitement in my life, right? And, you know, I get a lot of it, being able to travel with TPM and go to amazing places, and hang out with amazing men like yourself and Force of Nature and Chief and Animal and all the men in the movement. But obviously, when I come home, it's really important for me to be able to do that with Amelia too, right? Foster some feelings of excitement and adventure and so on, and make sure it's not just reserved for TPM, because it's easy to do when you love what you do. Now, obviously, we had plans to be going away over summer. One of those plans is to come out to the ranch, but with something that's happened with us in our personal lives, it's kind of thrown a little bit of a spanner in the works. It's left me in this scenario of, okay, I'm craving excitement. I'm wanting adventure with Amelia in particular. What can I do? And some way, somehow, it led me down the path of getting a camper van, right? We've not bought it yet. But even the process that I'm about to share with you has just been so rewarding. So this was on a Monday, last Monday morning. So last Sunday, there was no talk of a camper van. Wasn't even an idea that was on the radar for us. It was more of a pipe dream, something that we thought we might do one day, but not something we talk about a lot, right? Gets to last Monday, after reviewing my week, I don't recall how it came up, but this idea of a camper van came up, and I started to act on it immediately, and I started to look online at what camper vans were to buy. I found a couple, and the next idea was just call them and just ask a few questions and figure it out. Turns out the one that I called, because you can't see the location on the website, so you don't know whereabouts the seller's based in the UK. Turns out the one that I called was based 20 minutes away from where we live in North Wales. Okay, nice. So I called the seller up and arranged to go see that particular camper van last Monday. So I call Amelia and I send her a link to the camper van and say, hey, what do you think of this? I know it's out of the blue. I've called the seller. We can go see it tonight. I think we go, and let's just see what happens. She was obviously shocked, excited, a whole host of emotions. We went to go see it last Monday night. Point being is, we've continued the conversation this past week and we're exploring it. But this past week, because of that spontaneity that's been injected into our life and that excitement and anticipation, the level of connection between her and I this past week there's been a significant rise, right? The lightness, the playfulness, the laughing, the joking. And it really got me thinking about this idea of spontaneity, because it was a very spontaneous thing that I did. You could call it inspired action, you could, whatever you want to call it, right? But at the end of the day, it was spontaneity. And whenever I allow more spontaneity into my life, there's always a huge uptick in my mood. There's always a huge uptick in my connection with Amelia, because usually sometimes it involves her as well. And it's a huge energetic ROI that we get back, right? We talk a lot about the energy of wealth. And it got me thinking about how often as business owners we resist allowing spontaneity into our life, right? Because we're so disciplined, and discipline is a major strength. But when that discipline can border on becoming a little bit too rigid at times, you can exclude options just because this is the way you do them. You think that's the way it should be done. The camper van, I was excluding it. And I think part of what allowed me to create the headspace for that was us getting a sales director in place in TPM, which gave me a little bit more headspace, which then led down this path. I thought of you as well, right? You said something to me a couple of weeks ago about taking coaching calls. When you take your coaching calls when you're out walking in the forest or in nature, they call your calls far more enjoyable, right? It's the idea of being spontaneous and going and doing something, even something small. It doesn't have to be something major, and how much you get back from it. So over to you. You're smiling. I'm getting the sense you want to add something.
No, no, no. I'm just listening. I think it comes down to personalities a lot, right? Some of us naturally have more rigidity in our personalities. What I mean by that is we can get stuck on one path. And once we're on that path, it's hard for some of us to get off the path or see other alternatives, where others of us are just never on one path, right? There's other extremes. We're always jumping from one path to another with no idea of stickiness. And so you have, I think it's a case of personalities. You know, some people say, well, we had a plan. We said we had a plan. We're going to follow the plan. That's what we're going to do. And that's all we're going to do. Then you have somebody else that's like, oh, we had a plan, but it's changed. No big deal. And I don't think one's better than the other. I think, both of them are great. However, in relationships, if you don't realize what your partner's way of being is, and this goes in business relationships as well as personal relationships, that can cause a lot of conflict, right? It can cause a lot of conflict that's going through there. And when you have a lot of rigidity, it can be difficult because things often don't go to plan.
Yeah, I think about business owners in particular, though, right? How often they actually invite and embrace spontaneity into their life. I don't think it's very common. And the reason why I think that is because of that idea of discipline, right, and focus, and becoming so focused on achieving whatever it is they need to do, whatever path that takes, right? And as a result, tunnel vision, I guess, can set in as well.
I love you, but I think that's you.
I see it in you too, though.
Really?
Yeah, I think
I
about the
don't.
idea of taking the coaching calls, right? Are you getting away from the desk and being able to spend more time, let's say, in nature, and the greatest ideas come up, right? And the times when you do just go and do that spontaneously, or when you went for the massage last week, right? That was a spontaneous, planned, but relatively spontaneous thing that you did, right? That you wouldn't usually do. But as a result, you could have just been bullshitting me, but you said you had some good ideas that came to you while you were able to kind of switch off and relax. And I think we can get so used to just waking up, doing the routines or the gym or whatever it may be, cranking stuff out. And we do it from the desk, and we do it from the office, or we do it from wherever it may be. And it's just boom, 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 boom. Versus being open to, like I say, a bit of spontaneity about you could do those things from anywhere in some respects, right? But they often don't get done.
Yeah, I definitely have some spontaneity. I was thinking with the rigidity of having a plan and sticking to it and a discipline and all that stuff. I don't see that as a business owner thing. I see that as a personality thing. A lot of entrepreneurs are just not going to relate to that at all, in my opinion, in my experience. Yeah, there's always going to be spontaneity and things that we do differently. I do take coaching calls quite often, as much as possible, away from the desk. All phone calls. I even told you we were going to talk about a few things before hitting this podcast, and I said, no, let's just record the podcast, and I can call you. The reason being is I can put my headphones in and I can move around rather than sitting at a desk. As much as I love seeing your beautiful face, Tim. Um, so yeah, I honestly I think it's more of a personality thing. I definitely have some rigidity with me. There's certain things that I just want to know and I want it to be this way. Mine's more stubbornness probably than, we have to stick to a path. Once my mind's made up, often I can stick to it. But I think, as you know, I love changing directions a lot. Which if you're with somebody who isn't as interested in changing directions can cause conflict. And I think that can become an issue. But to your main overarching point of bringing back more spontaneity, one of the things that I love that you said was this idea, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. I certainly can. Is we may go to business dinners, like a really nice business dinner, right? And our wife and our kids are at home. We may go on business trips, and our wife and our kids are at home. And how often do we bring the same energy into our house that we bring to the business? Now, the thing that's common said is, especially businessmen, we give everybody our best and our wife and our kids the rest, right? And I think that's kind of what you're saying with you and Amelia. I know that was just part of this conversation, but we go on these epic adventures with epic men all over the world, and then you come home and my wife is looking at me like, hey, when's our turn? I hear that conversation a lot. And then you're doing smart, and now you guys are looking at a camper van, or a motorhome is what we call it, here in the States, which I think is a great thing. And having that fluidity and that ability to move from one idea to another, it's kind of like that Bruce Lee, idea of be water, my friend. Water can flow through anything. It moves through porous. It changes direction. It doesn't have that rigidity of always getting blocked.
Yeah, what I found really interesting, I love that Bruce Lee quote, was look, we've not bought a camper van. We're still in the process of looking, but even just the idea of by injecting something spontaneous into the relationship that wasn't really previously a conversation or consideration, what impact
Yeah.
that has then had on the mood in the relationship over that week, right? And it got me thinking about, where else see them blocking things from being spontaneous. I know a lot of guys resonate with the idea that, let's say, the wife wants to take a trip. It's a spontaneous trip, but it doesn't quite fit the idea or the plans that the guy had. But instead of surrendering to the spontaneity and going with it, because they could actually make it work, it wasn't really planned, but they could make it work, right? Instead of going with it, they kind of resist it. But if they were able to embrace more of that spontaneity, how might that then influence and affect the mood of the relationship?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I do that a lot, and maybe not as much as I could. Well, definitely not as much as I could, but as an example, my family's going back east, and Erin's taking the kids by herself, my wife, Erin. And then I was going to meet them at the tail end, but now you're coming to the US, which is the plan right now. And so we just changed it up. And she loves it. Like, I'm just like, oh no, we'll change it up. I'll come a little earlier, no big deal. And then I'll come back out here and I'll be with Tim. And you and I are going to run a couple events at the TPM Ranch, which is the new retreat center that we purchased and are running events through to help men. So I think it's adding that in. And then what else could we do? What are the fun things? Now, where I can lack some spontaneity, Tim, for me personally, is because I travel so much with TPM and I get to hang out with so many great guys. I don't have a need or desire to go out in the community where I live and meet new people, right? I've got literally, as you do, I have plenty of people that I really, really enjoy that I can talk to at any time. And I don't have enough time to connect with all of the people that I love. And a lot of the guys listening to this podcast right now, like a lot of them, I think about them all the time and wanting to call them, right? Guys, the inner circle, the brotherhood, guys that are in the movement, guys that have come and gone as alumni. I think about them a lot. I just don't have the time to call, as much as I'd like. So going out into the community and doing things can seem tiresome for me. And that's where I could use a little bit more flexibility within that area for me anyway. But, to your point, where else is it showing up in your life? Really, this is having different ways of looking at things is what I'm hearing you say. What's a different way of looking at a situation? I used to have this pack of cards that I had on my desk. And in college, I worked at a place called the Learning Smith. I did for a little while. I was in college, And what they did is they sold educational games and toys. It was at a big mall called South Coast Plaza in Southern California. It was like my first year in college, I think, or my senior year. First year in college. And so I worked there. And so I got this, and it's called the Creative Whack Pack. Remember it? I still have it. And I put it on every day. I would pull a new card out. And every time you looked at a problem, and I use these in business meetings. I'd go, hey, grab a card, pull a card, and it would have you look at something in a different way. So take the diagram you're working on and flip it upside down and work on it that way. Some of it was just weird, but it will give you a different way of looking at things that you wouldn't normally do. Now, you and I both study Keith Cunningham's work, and he has a great book called The Road Less Stupid. I recommend it for all business people. And it gives you questions, right? Questions to think about and ponder that are going to take you out of your zone for thinking time. These are all things you can do. I recently put, I can't think of the name, but it's a card game. It's not a game, but it's a bunch of questions. Every card's got a unique question. It's for partners and intimacy. I put all of those cards right where our coffee maker is. And in the morning, I flip over a new card and I leave it right by the coffee maker because I get up before 4 a.m. and my wife doesn't. And we have a discussion around that topic. And it could be an interesting topic, could be a boring one, could be funny, could be silly, could be sexy. And I'll bring that topic to the table. And the idea is to create spontaneity, to create conversation, to create intimacy. And it's not an action, but it is. There are things you can do. And as far as actions, I've done that. Now, all I'm doing is I'm realizing I'm not as spontaneous. So I'm putting ways of being within my life that are causing me to be spontaneous. That are having me look at things differently. They're exercising my brain. They're changing the way I look at things. And I'm adding those elements into my life deliberately so that I don't get stuck in the rut. Because I know, like most people, it's just easy to get stuck in routines.
Big time. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the Alpha Rise and Shine works so well for the men, right? They begin to do something different and start to have more spontaneity. They do something on a morning that's different to the norm. When we talk to the men about filling the cup, right, and putting their needs first, if you want to call it that, but more so specifically filling their cup, going and doing things for themselves that they love, that requires them to have more spontaneity. And it's one of the ways in which they become a lot more attractive to their woman, right? Their SMV goes up, their mood goes up as well, right? Because when you're stuck in a rut or stuck in routines and you just got your head down and you're like, this is the way it is, this is the way it is, this is the way it is. And we can all fall into that trap as business owners, right? We get so fixed on a target that we're saying we're going to achieve. We put our head down and we go for it. And one of the strengths is that we can focus and block everything else out. And just like anything, any strength can become a weakness. And when that becomes a weakness is when your life becomes too monotonous, right? And as a result, it lacks spontaneity, and that then filters over into your relationship. And you can try and kid yourself and say, oh, well, we're going on a date night every week, so we've still got a little bit of spontaneity. Well, when it's the same place you go for dinner on the same day and the same time, and you're kind of wearing the same clothes, there is no real spontaneity there. But one of the things I love how Franco says you can't negotiate desire, right? No. You're able to stoke the fire, and for men, finding ways to be able to introduce more spontaneity into their life definitely helps them to live a life that's a lot more passionate, and as a result, can inject a lot more desire into the relationship as well. Thinking of the brotherhood trips, right? A lot of the guys, when they come into the brotherhood, at first, one of the reasons why they resist going on the trips, the adventure trips that we've hosted all around the world at this point, right? Cuba, Morocco, Costa Rica, Iceland, got one coming up in Banff. You got to imagine these are events with like 40, 50 amazing businessmen coming together to do some incredible, have some incredible fun, whether it's quad biking in the Sahara or even if just shooting the shit and playing basketball in Costa Rica or learning to surf. It's always a ton of fun, yeah, along with the growth element. So, these events are really high regarded within the community. But even men saying yes to themselves and going on the event can be a big deal because they're not used to being spontaneous in that way and giving themselves permission to go and do that thing they really want to love to do, right? But point being is that the message I really want to convey in this episode is, where in your life do you get to introduce more spontaneity, right? And And what might you get back, be it in your relationship or the other territories, for doing so as well. One of the things that typically has to happen for you to be able to be more spontaneous, at least when we see this in the men, is either one, create more space in your life by getting rid of the things that just don't need to be there, right? You stop doing the things you think you should do, and you just start to do the things that either can only be done by you or that are actually going to move the needle, let's say in your business. You can create more space. But also just beginning to take a stand for yourself as well. A lot of the guys that come into the movement, right, within the activation method, they realize that they put themselves last. They lost touch with themselves, lost touch with their hobbies, with the passions, with other men. And as a result, they, like I said, lost themselves. They retreated and withdrew. And that's not attractive. It doesn't fire them up. And as a result, there's no wonder they're in a sexless marriage without any desire or attraction there. So when they start taking that action and being spontaneous again, it can feel a little bit weird at first, but it's like a muscle. The more they use it, the stronger it gets, the easier it becomes, and it just becomes a way of life for them. To which your point, Bruce Lee, be like water.
You call me Bruce Lee. I love it. No, it's true. All the things you're saying are great. And to the guys out there, it's like, how are you going to use this, guys? How are you going to implement this in your lives? So, Tim, can you give us 3 tips on how guys, if they're resonating with this, can utilize this today in their business and personal lives?
Ooh, yeah. The first thing that came to mind is you got to turn down the noise on the outside, right? The routines that we do with the men are so key because it gives them those spaces and those moments to reflect. And you gotta learn to connect to that muscle, a muscle of inspiration, spontaneity, whatever you want to call it, right? And in doing so, to begin to connect with it, you've got to have those moments to reflect, to actually be able to, connect. Second thing, let's say that you're able to connect with that inspiration or spontaneity. You've got to get out of your head. You've got to stop thinking about the logical steps. Think about the caravan. My dad called me on the Tuesday and he asked me what I was up to. So I told him straight away. He's like, oh, well, if you're looking at a camper van, you need to do boom, 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 boom. And it just started to make it super just complex and logical of all the steps you need to take or you should take in a linear fashion if you want to buy a vehicle or a camper van. And I just didn't. It's totally irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. It just completely killed the entire mood around what was happening, right? We know what we're doing to a degree. But we don't need his his advice on that one. Point being is a lot of the guys, let's take the Brotherhood event, they can come across something that feels exciting. And instead of just pulling the trigger and going with it, they'll get in their head and start to think about and deliberate and judge and question and weigh the pros and the cons. Even guys that are thinking about joining the activation method, right? They'll do the same thing, even though it feels like it's exciting and scary. They can imagine what they're going to get back in return. They could feel, act, get feedback. Feel, act, get feedback. Don't feel, think, deliberate, kind of act, and then get feedback. You got to pull that trigger faster. And the third thing, forget about step 2, 3, 4, 5. You've just got to take the next step. If you want to be spontaneous and introduce more spontaneity in your life, and you've turned down the noise and you're able to connect to that inspiration and you're feeling it and you're acting on it, don't get lost in, what am I going to do on the second step and the third step and the fourth step? Just act, taking the view, and just keep on going. Like, I'll use the camper van, for example. Oh, wouldn't it be cool? Let's look online. Oh, what about this one? Oh, call that. I didn't sit down and think, okay, right, I'm going to find a camper van. I'm going to find someone local. I'm going to call them. When could I possibly arrange? It was just boom, 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 boom. So take it one step at a time and just do it.
Love it. Absolutely love it, Tim. Love the mantra. Keep it going. Gentlemen, as we always say in the moment of insight, take massive action. And guys, take massive spontaneous action based on this show and this podcast as well. And change things up. I think you and the people around you will appreciate you for it. And we'll see you next time on the Powerful Man Show. All right, guys, that's a wrap for this episode. But as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. You see, there are two types of men that listen to a podcast like this. Those that go on from one podcast or show to another, just hoping things are going to change and realizing that they're going to be in the same place month after month, year after year. You see, I was this guy, so I completely get it. You may just not be ready. But there's also a second man that listens to a show just like this. And this is a guy who takes massive action so they can shorten the learning curve, compress time, and get results to be the wolf. See, wolf is an acronym for wise, open, loving, and fierce. Now, ask yourself, which one am I? And just be honest with yourself there. And there's no judgment on my end, but if you're ready to move from deactivated deer mode, which is defend, excuse, explain, react, to activated wolf, wise, open, loving, and fierce, then go over to thepowerfulman.com/grow and go there now. In fact, I'll make it super easy for you. I will even put the link right in the description here so you can just click it and go over there now to learn more. Guys, in the moment of insight, take massive action. Go from deactivated to activated because like I said, life is too short for average. And I'll see you on the next episode.